Down said, huh? It's a football podcast with Tom, Cody, and Sam. Welcome to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, where we break down a Dynasty Fantasy Football League every single week. I'm joined here with Sam Betland. Sam, how's it going?
Doing well. Good to be back after a 1 week hiatus.
Yeah, we missed you. We had Matt Trujillo on last week, but he was pretty awesome to talk to. Actually, it was kind of fun to get a different perspective, and that intro into us having guests on the podcast worked so well that we actually wanted to invite Laramie Davies on the podcast this week. Laramie, what's up, dude?
Hey, man. Nice to meet you. Like I said, thanks for having me, and hopefully I can bring up a little bit of popularity with this group that a bunch of guys I know, but it's great to be on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on. I mean, you keep talking about this popularity. I mean, we had like 12 views, I think, last week. So maybe you can get us into the 15s. That would be pretty ambitious.
Well, maybe. Hopefully I can at least give me some good trade offers, right? Don't think I'm just some stranger, right?
There you go. There you go.
I love it. You can be political with this podcast if you need to be.
There you go.
All right, so this week we've got we're going to run through our Week 8 fantasy football headlines as a kickoff to this podcast. Then we're going to actually interview Laramie and ask him a bit about his fantasy football career and his team this year and in the past with this league. And then we're going to do just a quick matchup rundown. We're not going to get too in-depth with the matchups. We're just going to talk about scores and maybe some highlights and if we have any thoughts about teams very quickly, though. And then we're going to finish off with the power rankings like we always do. And we want to get Laramie's thoughts this week about maybe he has completely different viewpoints on the teams, or maybe he just thinks we're smarter than he is and he doesn't have any different opinions, but we'll find out. So without further ado, Sam, Week 8, do you have any headlines for us?
Yeah, I'm going to be that guy right now. And I'm a Vikings fan. And I'm a fan of my own team. And I'm going to say Dalvin Cook is an insanely good running back. He's missed a game and a half due to injury and has already had the bye week, and he's still the RB2 on the season. I think he is going to be pretty tough to replace for any other team.
Yeah, I mean, is he number 2 after McCaffrey now, like in your mind?
Kamara might be above him, but I think those two are about in line other than injuries, which Dalvin has a lot of. So
yeah, he's crazy. I don't know. I actually, Laramie, you're not even a Vikings fan, are you? So you don't really care too much about Dalvin.
Well, I do, because I traded him to Sam back. And so it's kind of a complete 360 because I'm not a Vikings fan. And so not knowing him, I was like, I'm a college football diehard, but I didn't think he'd pan out. And I had a bad draft when we started. So I thought maybe I could sneak by, but it's completely backfiring on me from years ago now. So.
Yeah, that's a bit of a bummer when you make a misevaluation, or in this case, just a misknowledge evasion.
Yeah. I was going on the straight Vikings fan with a whole bunch of Minnesota guys that, maybe they'd essentially shit the bed for, but it's completely isolated to be like a top 3 back in the league. So he single-handedly beat the Packers. So it was good to watch.
Well, there definitely were injury concerns with him too early on in his career, but he seems to have completely wiped those away.
And 100% kind of what I was not hoping for. You don't hope for an injury, but I was kind of banking on that because of, we can get into my team later, but because of my depth that I had, I thought maybe just selling him a high spot there would kind of rekindle my draft. But yeah. No, I mean, good for Sam, right? Like he needs the points, but it was a good week for Dalvin.
It sure was. So Laramie, do you have a headline for us? What's your generic thought?
Well, like I said before, kind of we got going, kind of this is just the injury bug, man. Like it's crazy to see top line guys go down. Like you don't like seeing injuries at all, but I don't know what the 49ers are going to turn into now without their quarterback and their tight end, along with all the other injuries they have. I really kind of like to watch that division. So I guess I'll just go with the NFC out there and see kind of what they're doing to kind of keep it as an easy headline. But just the injury bug, man, like some guys are still not coming back. And so kind of rekindle that, I guess, to see what the 49ers are going to turn it into for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. Like, are they a legitimate team? Like, are they going to make the playoffs potentially? Could they like have a spike towards the end of the year, or without? I guess with Mullins potentially playing out, they might not be too good. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're kind of they're done. I really don't know what their backfield injuries, and they got. I like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, but I don't know if Mullins is the guy to necessarily get him there, especially with Kittle being gone. Jordan Reed's injury passed, still injured. I don't know. I just don't know what's going to happen. I think it's pretty ugly there.
Yeah, and even their defense doesn't seem like what it was last year. They've just kind of gone. They went 2-14 2 years ago, super good last year, and they've kind of regressed. It seems like a little bit this year too.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's actually a good segue into my headline, because I also wanted to pinpoint a specific team, a team that I've been paying quite a bit of attention to, other than the Lions, who I think most people know I'm a Detroit Lions fan, but is the New England Patriots. I was very interested to see how they would be performing without Tom Brady. And with Cam Newton, I don't know. I really, truly don't know what to think. Is this a Tom Brady leaving the New England Patriots problem? Or is this a Cam Newton leading the New England Patriots problem? And is it really just that Bill Belichick doesn't know how to coach a team without Tom Brady? And I'm starting to wonder, we're 7 games into the season and they're 2-5. And it really does. I know like ESPN's made a bunch of articles about this already, that like the dynasty is over. It was Tom Brady that was the Patriots. Like, do you guys agree?
I don't know. Obviously, Cam Newton is a pretty big hit to that team, and it's a very different system that I think the team is having trouble adjusting to. Also, we got to keep in mind that like 5 of their defensive players, which was the strength of their team, didn't play due to COVID. So I think that has something to do with it. But when it really boils down to it, Cam Newton hasn't played that well this year. So it's pretty tough to see.
Yeah, well said, Sam. I was just going to kind of bring up the defense on it. I mean, they're definitely missing some players, but I mean, at the same time, I don't like to be the devil's advocate, but I mean, Cam was driving to potentially tie the game. I mean, the Bills, they haven't been the team of that division by a long shot, and Bill Belichick's kind of dominant. But I don't want to take that credit away from the Bills. I think that they're a pretty damn good team, and I think too, with all the mix-ups that the New England Patriots are having with defense, new offense, kind of schemes, that it's kind of a learning curve that every other team goes through. I think it's hard to compare because the Patriots have been so good. But with the big change at quarterback and Cam essentially in the spotlight letting the team down, it's easy to point fingers. But I think he was on like the 12-yard line or something, so he almost got it done. It wasn't like a complete shit the bed. But, yeah, I definitely think there's struggles there. Edelman's hurt. I mean, I don't really know what running back to call on. I mean, they got a organized chaos right now, I think.
No, yeah, I'm actually glad to hear both your opinions on it, because it's just like fascinating for me watching that football team just slowly implode. And I think you're right. I think both what Sam said and what you said, Laramie, too. Like, I do think it could take time for them to develop with the new system that Newton kind of forces them into, with the mobile quarterback situation and just not being as much of an actual true field general the way that Tom Brady was. But no, I agree with you 100%, Laramie. Like, their defense is not nearly what it used to be, and they have no weapons. It's funny because I feel like they should have re-signed Antonio Brown. That would have maybe been a good move for them.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, let's move on from our headlines there into a more interesting segment, because it's only fitting on election night that we'd be interviewing maybe a future presidential candidate in Laramie. I don't know. Do you have any political aspirations?
Well, I am a Canadian citizen and an American citizen, so I take the heat from both sides of it, because like my interest in it is not probably the highest. I'd rather watch football than the news. I'd rather watch hockey than the news or anything like that. So, I mean, I definitely like to say myself as a leader, whether it be as a president, probably not. I don't think I have an aspiration there, but for what it's worth, I coach a hockey team. So I'm the president of the hockey team there, I guess. So we can fit it that way into something with what you're saying.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that were you born in Canada then?
Yeah, I was born in Alberta, and then I moved to Eastern Montana when I was little, and then I moved back to Canada. Played some hockey, obviously, and then went out to North Dakota in Minot, North Dakota for college, and then I transferred to Grand Forks, and that's where I met Matty Trujillo and Marcus and Mikey Reed.
There we go. That's, at first you said Maddie, and I was like, oh, that's your wife or something. And then I put it together. Oh, Matt Trujillo. Got it.
Oh yeah. I don't know what it is, man. I always just call Matty, like he's like my bro. Like, hey, what's up, Matty? Because I have a buddy that I went to school, another school, and I call him Matty too. But apparently, it's pretty soft sounding. Like it might be like it's crushing on him or something. But yeah, he could be my man crush in this league, I guess. So that's fine. It's Matt Trujillo. My bad, Matt T.
Well, for the longest time, we didn't know how to pronounce his name for sure, so we called him Trujillo. But
oh man, I never heard his last name when I first met him. Like Matt T. That's how I just called him.
Yeah.
That's a good call. We didn't do that. We just said it wrong every time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think you last podcast too, didn't you, Trujillo?
Yeah, as a joke, I said Matt Trujillo.
Yeah, love it.
Man. But on that note, let's talk about your I'm gonna pull up your team for a second here, but I don't really want to talk about your team quite yet because I just want to ask you, like, how did you get started with fantasy football? Is this your first fantasy football dynasty league, or have you been doing that before? I mean, when did you start at all?
Well, I've kind of been in the fantasy football stuff for, a long time. I don't really know. I know Matt dropped how many years and stuff, but I mean, for the longest time, I've been kind of a fantasy football guy, just because a lot of my buddies used to do it, and it's kind of a way to get away from or get with the guys and hang out and do all that kind of stuff and do all that kind of thing. But as far as dynasty goes, I'd never done it before, but I always had kind of, if you put all the time and effort into it, why not make it so it's like impactful for, multiple years and that kind of thing. So this is my first dynasty with you guys, but coincidentally enough, I'm also in another dynasty and another dynasty other than this. So it's like, once it kind of started, it just, it just kind of all came at me at once. So that's the pros and cons of being in a dynasty, I guess, of, if you're in one and then you're in another, it's kind of like you're kind of cheering for everybody. So it's kind of tough that way. But this is by far my leader of the crews for sure. I mean, I've invested more time into this one than a lot of the other ones. Some of the other ones are just fill-ins.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Is that just because this is the people the most people in this league, or is it just that this league is the most money, or what?
Well, I think this is the most committed. I think that's the biggest thing for my other leagues that I'm in. I've, had a buddy or two that just said, hey, you want to come and be in a dynasty? Because they kind of know that I play dynasty football, or fantasy football, I should say, for a while. So it's like, yeah, I'll jump in. But then it's like, it's kind of an investment, right? Because you might have a good draft and you're like, oh, I guess I'll stay in this league. And then you're like, crap, now I'm in 3. But this league for sure, I think, with just the commitment, right? I don't think we've had any new players come in. So, I mean, even if I don't know you guys, that's kind of the foundation I like, is that, we know that everybody's going to try, and, the expectations year to year are still there. And, we've involved into a couple rule changes here and there, the flex and all this stuff like that. So like, I really like how we're doing it, and the effort, man, like you guys doing the podcast, having people on, kind of, making it just bigger than button pushing. I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, this is definitely my leader of the crew. I won't be bailing on you guys unless you guys give me the boots. So.
Never. We could. I shouldn't even say I have the power, because only Sam is the one on this call that can do that.
It depends on what you trade me. That's what I'll say.
Well, I gave you Dalvin Cook so far, so
that's true. That's true. You're doing well so far, then. So I think you can stay for at least another year.
That's good, because I've invested for at least one more, I think, with picks. So I'll be there.
Good deal.
So we do have Sam on the podcast, one of the co-commissioners. I have to ask Laramie, if there was one thing, because you actually haven't had a chance ever to join our winter meetings, so to speak, or our rule meetings where we talk about different things we might want to do, things we might want to change up. Is there anything that you feel that you wish you could change in the league as the way it is right now?
Right now, I don't really think there's too much of a change. I was just, when we first started, I think that was my biggest complaint or issue, was the time to put in to figure out like the defensive players and stuff when we first started. I thought that was kind of just like, I think in some sense you don't like the kickers, right? That was kind of my sense on the defensive players, of like, come on, man. Like, one guy has 17 tackles, one game, and he wins the game. It's kind of the kicker mindset. So, and I just didn't really have the time to be putting into, cover those bye weeks, or if I should keep this guy in a dynasty league for defensive players. Like, that was the biggest thing. But I mean, now I just wish we could have restarted the draft, because I had such a poor draft, because I like the way that we're doing it, though. If you win it, is it back? No, I think that's the one thing I would change. The one thing that we do in our league and maybe I'm wrong, maybe we do it in this league, is if you win it back-to-back years or, 3 years in a row, there's a dynasty pot, and then you start over. And then you.
Yeah, we're only laughing. I mean, I saw Sam laughing, and I started laughing because he started laughing because it's a perfect segue that you brought that up, because maybe this is the time we just really quickly talk about that, because that was actually supposed to be one of our segments one of these weeks, was talking about that exact subject, is the Empire rule. It's something we've talked about a few times, but I guess I'll turn it to Sam. Like, Sam, now that you're the team that would be the Empire, it was previously Cody. How do you feel about the Empire rule?
I like it. At the last rules meeting, I brought it up. I think it's good that everyone can just try their hardest and no one really dominates for a 10-year span, essentially, which I'm not saying my team ever would, because it wouldn't. I'll probably be done in 3 or 4 years. But it's kind of nice that if there is such a dominant team, instead of having people leave the league, there's kind of an end in sight, almost like you're mentioning, and then you can just redraft. On the flip side, it was brought up to me that it sucks for people that are trying to rebuild. And then if you're getting to that rebuilding point, then the league ends, it kind of sucks. But yeah, overall, I really, really like the Empire rule. But we couldn't get a pass last year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm wondering if oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up. What did you have to say, Laramie?
No, sorry, man. I didn't. I guess we got to get this whole I'm not Cody, how you guys do your 1-2 takes. I think that's the biggest thing, Sam, would be kind of the understanding of, are you on the try now and win for 3-4 years for the Empire? Are you in rebuilding mode? And I think that would kind of get more parity going, though, if you know that it's, essentially maybe like Cody this year. He kind of sold the farm last year after he won back-to-back to kind of go on the opposite end of it. But if he knew there was maybe 3 years and he would start over, he might not be rebuilding as much, kind of putting it all, 4 years away to try and rebuild. But it's an interesting side of it too, because I don't think anybody plans to lose, right? But if you get on that side of it, when is rebuilding done rebuilding? If you have a guy that's going to be like Sam's case, winning it 3 years in a row, is it really worth trying to rebuild, or is it just really worth, okay, I'll just start over then? And I think that's where you get the guys leaving or not trying. But I definitely think if we have that transition, that it would kind of, we're all even there. So I think that would kind of help on the rebuilding phase.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to talking about it again this off season, just because I'm with you. Like, I don't have a marriage to either side. Like, I can see both sides of it, but I'm wondering if there's a middle ground. Like, if there's a way to maybe not do a complete redraft, but maybe do a keeper system. If we were to do a redraft after someone won like 3 years in a row, so you could keep 5 players or something, and then still get some incentive. So if your team was really bad, then you would keep 5 players and you would get like X amount of auction money, or we would just maybe do a complete snake draft over again. Who knows? I do know that the auction draft definitely did create more of a divide in the teams, just because auction in its nature is very cutthroat, and you can make mistakes very easily in the drafting phase. I know, Laramie, it sounds like you feel like maybe you made some mistakes in the auction.
Well, I've done the auction draft before, and I'm really pro auction because I love the fact that you think somebody's worth more than I think. And I really like that side of it. But yeah, like you said, it just takes one, overpay. For example, I'll use a Vikings fan. We used to have a buddy in our dynasty league that we did a auction draft, and he always spent top dollar plus $30 or whatever it was on Adrian Peterson. And it just, it ruined him for dynasty. But, we knew he could just bump up the market on him, and then we'd have more money left over. So I like that side of it, where it's kind of the stock market. Like, are you interested in that guy? Well, we're all going to push him up because we know you like Stafford and the Lions, or something like that. But it definitely is. It's not forgiving. It's not forgiving at all if you make up those mistakes, because you lose your money, you don't get it back.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it, because, but at the same time, it is a format that seems most suited for redraft, where if you get screwed over for 1 year, whatever, like, it doesn't really matter. Whereas dynasty, it is. At first, early on, I was a huge proponent of this, and Sam had to kind of talk me off it, because I was huge on like, well, if you suck at auction, then you suck at auction. Your team sucks. And then Sam had to be like, well, but that's not the best for competitive integrity. And that's actually why Sam is a co-commissioner. I have nothing to do with making up the rules for the league. So,
Well, I don't know. Everyone has everything to do with making up the rules. We vote on everything. So it's not like Matt and I are just dictating things, but.
Okay, Mr. Putin over here.
That's what I say, at least. That's what I say. But yeah, I think kind of what you brought up before, Tom, is actually a good idea that we should maybe propose this year is maybe like a hybrid system where it is part Empire League, but you could keep a few players. Because it seems like to me that everyone has 2 or 3 players that they really, really like and they wouldn't want to get rid of. But then it really would help the competitive integrity of the league too. So maybe we can devise some system for that.
Yeah, at least just have the discussion. I think every year that we discuss things, the discussion changes because we're learning so much more about dynasties as we go and what our preferences are. So with that, I actually do want to turn the attention to the screen that I am sharing, which is your team, Laramie. And it's a team that's currently in the playoff race.
That's the moment you guys have been waiting for from the last few podcasts about what the going on. So yeah, let's get into it, man. Whatever you want to interrogate me on, we can get after it. I definitely have a couple things I'd like to bring up. No excuses, but I mean, they are cold hard facts in my opinion, but yeah, I'll let you lead the way.
I love it. Okay, well then let's just start off with the top. Ever since that we changed into a super flex league, quarterback has been by far the most important position in my opinion. And before it wasn't as much, but Superflex just makes the quarterback position way more influential and way more interesting to watch, and way more critical to actually have a reasonable starting quarterback as your second quarterback. At the moment, you have 2 quarterbacks, and I've actually, I'll go on record saying that I've reached out to you a couple of times saying like, hey, do you want a quarterback? Do you want a quarterback? Just because I don't know if you want a third guy to back up. But I know one of them is actually due to injury, though, if I remember correctly. Oh, maybe not. You do just have 2 quarterbacks. Never mind. How do you feel about your quarterbacks? What do you think about Matt Ryan and Jared Goff?
Well, I think that kind of comes back into the rule change, right? I think if I am correctly speaking, don't quote me on this, but I don't think I was in favor for the super flex for the quarterback just for that simple reason, because when I started the draft on this initial league kind of settings that, I just didn't see the point of having more than 2 or, picking up, an extra guy just for that super flex. I had kind of running backs or tight ends to fill in that spot. But I like Matty Ice. I think his time's kind of coming near the end. And just granted my considerations for where I was at last year for the, the quarterback draft, that Jared Goff, I thought maybe just with the youth, he would kind of be probably my best option. Because I think I had Jameis Winston before. Thank God I didn't keep him. It's definitely tough. I like the fact that I get the option for quarterbacks, but at the same time, I think people know the leverage of me that I, might have to overpay to get one a little bit. But I'm content with what I got right now. I think Matty Ice can put up some decent points to give me a spot. And then Goff, I don't think he's been playing terrible this year. Yeah, he's had a couple moments, but with just my, running back heavy team that I've kind of based my whole team on, that with Mark Andrews and Noah Fant there, that I could get away with the week just sneaking in there with one of those guys starting, I guess was kind of my philosophy on it. But yeah, granted, if there was a free agent quarterback out there that was going to put up 20 points a week or over 15, then I would definitely go that route for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, just to speak into your credit, those 2 are very good quarterbacks. You have right now Matt Ryan's a low QB1 and Goff is a high QB2, so both very solid and good starters. And yep. I believe in like the compensation draft or supplemental draft, we're going to call it, that we did for quarterbacks this year, you had a really early pick, which is where you got Goff. So then your second pick was really late. So it kind of makes sense that your third quarterback wasn't necessarily there. But like you said, with your running backs and your tight ends, you do actually have okay starters. They probably won't be as good as a quarterback, but they're not going to get you 3 or 4 points. They'll probably get you 10 or 11. So not as big of a detriment to you.
Yeah, and Jameis Winston got picked up by the Saints. Otherwise, I had Taysom Hill too, and I thought Taysom Hill would maybe be a flex play just if I essentially got desperate, because I wasn't banging on his being injured, Breeze being injured, but I just thought Taysom Hill kind of doing a jack of all trades for them, that he might be able to sneak in there. But now with Winston there, kind of I had to let him go, so I really did handcuff myself with that third quarterback that I did draft. It turned out to be kind of a cut for me. So.
Well, it is something you could address in the in the draft next year. You could maybe get one of the late flyers in the second round at quarterback and hope it develops into something, or even you have that first round pick too.
You'll have 102 most likely. So I mean that could be, I would guess Justin Fields, but could be someone else too. So
Yeah, no, I definitely it's in the back of my mind for sure. It's definitely in the back of my mind because there's a few, I think, substantially great playmakers coming out of college football this year. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that Mike's pick's going to be a 2 overall, but I'm hoping at least top 3. So at least I can maybe get Fields, or I think is it Trey Lance from North Dakota State too? That's been pretty, I mean, I don't think I'm going to take him, but I mean, just prestigious quarterbacks kind of coming out, that those 3 are kind of the top. So it's definitely an option for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can say for a fact that you do not need a running back. I mean, you have arguably the best running backs in the league, and you know, if I can't say that, I know for sure you would say that. And this is probably the most contentious positional group that you have on your team for me, because every time I try to trade for it, because I'm like, holy crap, this guy's 3 running backs. Like no other team. I mean, you think about it that way. You have, if you divide the 32 starting running backs in the league divided by 12, most teams should average like 2.5 like quality running backs on their team, and you have 3 solid running backs. So every time I try to trade with you, you value them so highly. So this is your time right now to pitch those running backs. Go for it.
And so I think when the thing that I have the biggest struggle with is that, not disagreeing with you that I value them so high, I just felt like that's kind of the core of my team going forward. And it has to be like my vision that if I don't get something to overcompensate them in a dynasty, aspect, that, my receivers are garbage, but my 3 running backs are kind of just my foundation of what I have as like a core group. And so I really like Miles Sanders. I think he's very, very talented. And now some of that, facts of him being injured and maybe not being able to take that full, 25 carry day in, day out, which is, pretty crazy for running back to do. But I just think that those guys are kind of my foundation of being able to be a Sam in the future. And right now, if I was to give up one of those guys for maybe a wide receiver 1 for me, it still might not be a wide receiver 1 in comparison to other elite teams, because my wide receivers are so bad that even like a wide receiver 1 like Devontae Parker might not be a DeAndre Hopkins ever, right? But he's still a wide receiver 1 for me, that I just kind of take that shot with my 3 running backs and just kind of essentially get by with my Sterling Shepherds and my huge letdown of Michael Gallup this year, and, essentially my lucky Robbie Anderson. But it's tough for me to understand how to get it across, other than the fact that I do value them high, but there definitely is a market for them. I just have to kind of see that I get the same compensation for my outcome on my team. Not necessarily, I don't need a DeAndre Hopkins for David Montgomery, because that's not realistic. But, if I'm not going to get a guy that's, essentially going to get the amount of work that he's going to get and that volume, that I think just holding on to my running backs is the best way out. And I do have a lot of draft picks coming up this draft. I think I have 5. So I'm kind of just, maybe struggling to get in the playoffs and, not win it by any means. But I think I have enough, draft picks where I can maybe address those issues and get a Laviska Shenault or a Brandon Ayuk next year, and just kind of help pad that. Because I know it's tough to look at my receivers, but I'm just trying to bank on my running backs carrying that spot for me, I guess.
yeah, just to chime in, I first of all, I didn't know you had that many picks. That's actually really impressive that you have the early first and then 3 solid seconds as well, which is awesome. But just kind of for your benefit and the league's benefit, what is an example of the value you'd be looking for your running backs? For, like, let's say maybe David Montgomery, who's clearly your worst of the 3. Like, what kind of receiver would you be looking for, or quarterback, I guess, if you're looking for that as well, for David Montgomery?
Yeah, and actually, the exact value I would go, I think, like, just let me pull up the stats here. I think, like David Montgomery's a top 15 back, right? Like, I mean, a top 15 receiver would be comparison for me, I think, in that aspect. But with that being said, I think that's the same thing that Tom was bringing up about me having, 3 maybe core running backs. Maybe, a team like yourself might have 2 wide receivers of that caliber, but if somebody was to give up a top 15 wide receiver, it might be a big drop off for their next receiver. to even be comparison for. So I would say like somewhere in that like 15 to 25 range. But at the same time, I take into consideration the age, who's throwing it to them, just because Mike Evans or Godwin's there, obviously they're elite, but Brady's not going to be there in the next 2 or 3 years, where I think that's where my team's going to be better at, is in 2 or 3 years. So essentially it might look good on paper right now getting that, but at the same time, when Drew Brees or Tom Brady's gone, when I'm looking to maybe try and push for that, extra playoff win, that those guys might not be relevant for there. Now, obviously I would take Godwin right now for Montgomery, right? Because I can sneak into the playoffs, but Mike's not going to give that guy up for that, because he doesn't take David Montgomery maybe as quite as high as caliber as I do. But I mean, I'm all ears. I mean, I'm not definitely going to turn anything down. But I definitely want to see that impact on my overall team change for my receiver, because I think if I get anybody in the 30s and 40s, I'm better off holding on my running backs that I have, because I already kind of got those receivers. So I definitely need to see a substantial change in my receiver core, in my sense. Otherwise I just kind of thought I'd hang on to them and go for wide receivers in the draft next year.
Which is definitely a really good option. I mean, you mentioned 2 players that I drafted in the second round, who are, one of them I would classify as, end first rounder in T. Higgins, and Brandon Ayuk is now an early second rounder at this point. It could even potentially be viewed at as a first rounder from last year too, depending on how much you like Brandon Ayuk. But yeah, you're right. Wide receiver is definitely the easiest position to draft in the later rounds and actually get a hit on, in my opinion. And so I guess the only concern I would have, and I don't know if this is your concern too, but do you have any fear that building a team off of running backs has a lower longevity compared to that of wide receivers?
I do, but I have running backs, and so I don't know if I can get that quarterback. So if I was to go back, from day one, yes, I would definitely understand that. But because of the situation I'm in now of getting Sanders and Montgomery and Mixon being so young, that I know that they are, they're not going to last as long. I still think their core right now for the next 3-4 years is better than maybe trying to build a wide receivers, because wide receivers so young. There's so many impactful young wide receivers that come in every year that, man, like you can get I think Deontay Johnson was a free agent pickup last year from Mike Reed, and he could potentially be, like you said last week, a wide receiver 1 on that offense. So it's like, do I risk trading for a wide receiver 1 of a definite RB1 for my team going forward? Or do I kind of play the flyer rule? And I know I got my running backs. Now do I just kind of hopefully maybe pick up a free agent here, or, get a couple good draft picks that kind of overall bring my depth? Because I don't think we can all live that same life that Sam has, where he has a little bit of everything, eliteness. I kind of got to pick my battle of lanes, where I'm going to try and make my elite sneak attack on him in the next 2-3 years if I can. But I'm hurt, man. I definitely don't know what to do sometimes, because I have so many draft picks that I gotta have to cut some of my guys anyways next year if I keep all 6 of those, right? And so my thing is just the safety of running backs for me, is because it's kind of my blanket of my team right now, with Mixon and Sanders being, in my opinion, I think they're very elite and they're still young, that I think their offenses are, they rely on them a lot. So yeah, I'm going to draft wide receivers next year in the draft. So, I mean, unless I can kind of find a movement with you, or I know somebody's been kind of after me with, a couple players and stuff to see if I can get some running back movement. But I just feel right now, like, even if I do get a wide receiver for a running back, I'm not going to give a compatible enough player to go and beat Sam. So, I mean, ultimately playing for 4th place isn't a goal for me. So I'm trying to see that kind of a side of it as well. Unless I were to get, a Hopkins or a Ridley for some reason for those guys, then that would put me in elite status there, that I'm kind of just saying, like, it is what it is. I know I need a wide receiver, but even if I do get a guy for Montgomery or for Sanders, it's not going to put me to Sam's level. So I guess that's kind of my side of it. I mean, I definitely am open to ears of, proving me wrong and stuff, right? Like that. Cause I know obviously there's been a couple guys saying like, oh, Davies needs a wide receiver to put him there, but I just don't see myself beating Sam or even beating Matt with a wide receiver trade for running back. I don't see that happening. So maybe I'm stubborn. Maybe I'm just kind of one-dimensional, but that's kind of my philosophy on it, I guess, if that makes any sense to you at all, Tom.
Oh, I'm actually really glad to hear you kind of walk through that, because I've always wanted to hear your viewpoint. Sam, I'm going to turn that question to you, because Laramie, about halfway through, you asked a really interesting question. Like, you basically posited the question, should I just hang on to my running backs and then wait for my 4 second round or higher picks to build my wide receivers, or should I make a trade? Sam, I'm going to turn that one to you. What do you think?
That's tough. See, honestly, I don't know. Like I like all your running backs too. I mean, I drafted Mixon originally, and I drafted Montgomery in the rookie draft. So like obviously, I like those guys a lot to begin with, and I think they've proven that they're good. And obviously, Miles Sanders has been really good too. I think your team is like, at least in my opinion, there's a lot of ways you could go. You can hold steady, try to draft receivers, and that's great. I never even considered this because like I said earlier, I didn't know you had that many draft picks. But like, have you considered like selling draft picks for a receiver, or are you just kind of in a holding pattern, looking to draft receivers with that rather than trade?
Yeah, I've actually been voicing with Mike Reed. I tried to get, see what he wants for Godwin and stuff like that. But at the same time, if I get a wide receiver, one from there, he's obviously going to look for, like, I think 2 first rounds at least, right? So, I mean, that's what he values Godwin at. And then I kind of go back to the fact of Matty Ice is not going to be around that long either. So if I'm going to get a quarterback, maybe this is the year to get a guy that's going to be able to kind of come in like a Baker Mayfield. He might have a good year or two and then see where he pans out in the long run. That's kind of what I'm banking on with my first round this year. But I mean, I'm all for trading draft picks. I mean, I don't necessarily think my draft picks are the guys that are going to be every down players, right? Like they might just be a couple, whiffs. And so that's where I like the fact that if I get a guy, he's mine in hand rather than, crossing my fingers, hoping my draft pick works out. So definitely up to trading my draft picks. That first round with Mike, I'm kind of holding as a pretty high pick just for the fact that Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence are there, and my quarterback is a little older. So that's kind of my value on that. But I mean, I definitely think there's a wide receiver out there that can help me, that I can give up 2 first, 2 second rounds for. If somebody guys need, rebuilding and stuff like that they want draft picks, it would definitely help them out. But I think I'm on the fence too. Like it's frustrating me because I just want a guy like a Robbie Anderson, but I wanted that to be Michael Gallup so that I knew that my youth at wide receiver was there instead of kind of maybe a veteran that maybe just was in a bad offense in the Jets. And, he could have been this guy the whole time. That's the frustrating thing to me. Like Sterling Shepard, stay healthy. He's proven that he can, be a 15-point guy, but he can't stay healthy. But no, definitely. I mean, as a whole, I'm up for trading a running back. I'm up for trading my draft picks for sure. But I guess just knowing if anybody's listening that, my first round is probably going to be a top 2 pick, maybe top 3. So I feel with me and my wide receiver area that I have, 3 second round wide receiver picks and then 1 quarterback pick as my first round. So that's kind of where my vision is. And if by chance I get lucky and hit him, I get a Justin Jefferson, a Chanel, and a Ayuk. I mean, I'm sitting in the driver's seat with my vision, right? And so I guess maybe that's where it kind of upsets Tom and Maddie because I think I'm so like Matt, that I put him on such a high platform because I feel like I'm only like 2 or 3 guys away from being, maybe a top 4 dynasty team in our draft or in our league.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was just going to say I should probably explain myself because you should never take my frustration to heart because really, if there's anything I've learned about anyone in a dynasty league is that everyone wants to fuck over the next guy. And so it's so easy to get frustrated. Like when I'm looking at your team, I'm like, oh, I could probably get this guy. And if you completely turn, it's some sort of like psychological phenomenon that I get frustrated when you turn down my shitty offer. It's like, how does that even make sense? But I find myself doing that so often. So you should not. Yeah, I totally understand your logic. Like I do think that you might overvalue your running backs a little bit too much, but at the same time, I overvalue my receivers that I'm trying to trade to you too much. So it goes hand in hand. Let's talk about your receivers though, because it's been a bit of a tumultuous situation. No clear number 1 guys. Michael Gallup, to your point, you were kind of hoping maybe he would burst through this year with Amari Cooper, and then they drafted CeeDee Lamb, and then Dak Prescott got injured, and then Andy Dalton is in concussion COVID protocol, but he doesn't have COVID, just for the record. But yeah, do you keep any of these wide receivers for the future?
I mean, I guess if I could kind of like backtrack of like my whole theory on my receivers. So when we originally drafted, I had bad internet. And like, I think I drafted 2 tight ends and like my defensive players like very early on auto drafts. So yeah, somebody say it's an excuse or not, but I mean, I get it. I'm not going to draft defensive players that early, and I'm not going to take 2 tight ends that early. And I'm, big surprise. Everybody knows that, but like I did that on my auto draft. So I was behind the 8 ball already. And so like my number one thing was to build running backs. That was just kind of like my rebuilding stature of 3 years ago of screwing up as a manager. But I don't think I'm going to keep these guys, but right now I kind of have to. And even going forward, I have to until I get the guy that takes their spot. Like I really thought Traquan Smith would be a dude in New Orleans when he was coming out of college. I really liked him. But I mean, he's gotten so many opportunities and he's still like putting up like 6 points last week, 4 points. Like there's no Sanders, there's no Thomas, and Drew Brees and Sean Payton just don't give him the ball, or they don't give him the ball enough, or he doesn't take a chance or take advantage of his opportunities. Like I don't know. And I really liked him coming out of college. So I thought he was going to be kind of a mentor to take over in the future, or an apprentice to take over in the future. And I thought the same thing about Gallup. I don't know if you remember last year, but on the I think Matt Meggs had some like kind of quotes or one-liners or like $5 bets or whatever the heck you wanted to call it, that Gallup is going to be as good as Diggs, and was on like my list. And it was like Gallup was just as good as Diggs last year, I think, except for like 5 points, and I think he missed a game. So like I thought maybe Gallup this year was going to go, not potentially take over Cooper, but be that guy of a Ridley, a Julio kind of thing. And then they drafted CeeDee Lamb. So if I would have known that, I would have been selling high to probably Matt Magnuson. Hey, you interested in Gallup? Just because if I would have known that now. But that's kind of put me in a bind, I think, for my receivers. And then I kind of bought into Tyrell Williams going to Oakland. I thought maybe he'd be okay, and he hasn't even touched the field this year. Like he's on the IR still. And that's kind of my philosophy of, you win some, you lose some, and I've lost all of them on my wide receivers. But, at least Robbie Anderson's getting me some points that I thought he'd be a wide receiver 3 forever, or even a wide receiver flex play just on like bye weeks. But without him, like he's just kind of carrying my team for as far as my receiving core. And I don't know, man, it's frustrating for sure, because I thought the potential was there. The youth on my team was there for those guys to take the advantage of getting the opportunity, but they just haven't done it. Have not done it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's good hit for you on Robbie Anderson. That's been awesome. I think Gallup was super unlucky. No one expected Dallas to get CeeDee Lamb, and Gallup did play really well last year. I think he had even more yards than Cooper. I could be wrong. It was at least really, really close. So yeah, he would have been a nice one to fill into your wide receiver 1. And kind of like you mentioned before, at least your running backs and tight ends are good enough to make up for it a little bit. But I do think you've gotten at least a bit unlucky with your wide receivers this year.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom. And then I want to ask you a question too, Sam, on your take on my tight end situation. So go ahead, Tom, what you thought, man.
Oh, that's a perfect segue. Because I wanted to say it's really interesting. I actually think Robbie Anderson, we've talked about him so many times, like every week we talk about him, it seems like, because it's just shocking to me that he stepped up into that wide receiver 1 role for Teddy Bridgewater, because I thought that was clearly taken by DJ Moore. He's 27 years old, and this is kind of a shock to everyone. Is he a sell high for you at all, in the same way that Gallup was last year?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know why I wouldn't hit that home run, but you guys keep burying him on this podcast. I feel like I can't sell high on him. I can only sell like 4 feet instead of 8 feet. So you guys are listening now. Tom's maybe, turning that page to sell high. I mean, he's performing, guys. Get the point. He's a great thing for Sam to put on as a flex. Sam, give me the first round for him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't have it, otherwise I would.
Yeah, that's true. But no, I think at his age, he's got to be a sell high for me, especially if I'm kind of going on that philosophy of I'm not going to beat Sam or Matt right now anyways. To build those wide receivers, to get that 6-year difference in age, to go back and get another rookie, definitely is a possibility. But if I lose Robbie Anderson, I'm like definitely not making playoffs, because he's my wide receiver core. So but I mean, like you said, Gallup, yeah, he's definitely a sell high this year for sure.
Yeah, and then you want to talk about tight ends. So let's talk about your tight ends. To me, it's unbelievable that you hit with Mark Andrews. Like walk me through that whole situation with you actually having him on and picking him up on your team.
Man, I'm a big Texas Longhorns fan. and all he did at the University of Oklahoma was bury us. And I knew that he would be super good in that offense. The biggest thing that I was questioning was having Hayden Hurst there as well, because I thought Hayden Hurst could be a home run there as well. And I just thought, which one's going to be? But I think Mark Andrews is great. The only thing I don't like is the bipolarness. Like last week, he got 3 points. I don't even know what he got last week. Not much, but
5.2.
Yeah, I think he's I really think he's probably a tight end one in dynasty formats going forward, just with all the injuries to Kittle now and Ertz kind of falling off the map. And with Kelsey's age comparison, it's only 2 or 3 years difference. I think maybe Kelsey's a little older, but I really like Mark Andrews. But the problem with having Mark Andrews is I took Noah Fant as also kind of my insurance policy, but I'm kind of having a tough time getting Fant on the field right now because the Broncos are so bad, and that's my NFL team. So it's very frustrating there to be he's definitely a top 5, in my opinion, dynasty tight end, but I just can't find a way to play him because it's just, I don't know if he's going to get a ball because our offense is so bad.
Yeah, he's man, I think I sold you Fant at one point a couple years ago. I love Fant, man. I think he's super good. I agree that the Broncos offense has been pretty brutal, but I think him and Drew Lock going forward are actually going to be so good together. And I think Andrews is probably a little bit better than Fant, but honestly, Fant is like my dynasty tight end 4 or 5. I think he's just super, super good. And I think to be honest, I think you might ask my opinion earlier. Maybe I'm just misremembering that, but I think your tight end core is literally the best in the entire league between Andrews, Fant, and I think you had Gronk or someone else on your bench.
Yeah, I got.
Yeah, so I don't know. Your tight ends are elite. Have you thought about selling any of them? I mean, you have 3 top 12 tight ends right now.
Well, I think I got a couple offers for Gronk, and it was a 4th round or something, but that's not going to really help me. I want a receiver. My Sterling Shepard and Gronk and package that for someone a little bit better than Sterling Shepard. I think would be a good approach to take on that because I can't play Fant. I sure as hell can't play Gronk, but I've been playing Gronk in a couple times just for bye weeks and then Fant being injured. But Gronk's kind of catching stride. I think he's got 3 touchdowns 3 weeks in a row now, and he's kind of getting options. So I think a guy that's maybe pushing the playoffs like Matt or, Jake, that I don't know their tight end situation, but if they're getting, a little bit of an insurance policy, I mean, I think that's a guy that I would be willing to trade for sure. And I'm looking at wide receivers, obviously, and then I don't need running backs. So wide receivers and or picks would be kind of what my philosophy is. But the tough thing is with Gronk is what's his value? That's kind of what I was going to ask you guys is what do you guys think his value is? Because he might win it for you this year on a week that he has 2 or 3 touchdowns because Godwin's been hurt. Brady's been kind of all over the map with Evans other than catching a touchdown every week. Well, what do you guys think? What am I asking for? Is it too much? A 2nd round or a 3rd round is way too much, or what's your philosophy on it?
At least to me, it's easiest to equate it to picks. And I'd say to me, to a competitive team, an early 3rd or maybe a late 2nd is kind of what Gronk's worth because I honestly wasn't a huge fan coming into the season because I thought he was old and washed up. But I mean, the last 4 weeks he's produced every week, so I actually do think that he's legit. So yeah, I'd say late 2nd, early 3rd is pretty reasonable to me.
And OJ Howard being hurt, it helped him out a lot.
Yeah, true.
It did. You don't want to ask me because I was flat out wrong. I always make bold predictions on this podcast, and I was the one that was saying Rob Gronkowski's droppable in Dynasty after 4 weeks. I think I was saying it because I was that's enough weeks for me. Throw him out. He looks slow. He looks bad. His highest target share was 7, and after that it was 3. And then the last 4 weeks you nailed it. He's been killing it. So I don't think I wouldn't personally trade a 2nd, but I think that I would seriously consider trading a 3rd if I needed a tight end for the playoffs. So I'm surprised you haven't been able to get that. I mean, maybe you haven't shopped for it, but I think.
The only reason I say he's definitely a winning team 2nd round pick is because he's a top 10 tight end. He's literally better than everybody's teams. That there's no way I think Mark Andrews is number 5 tight end. Don't quote me.
Yeah.
Button quick.
Yep.
Quicker on the buttons. And I got 2 of the top 10 guys, and we have a 12-man league. I feel like he's got value to somebody to pick up that is playing. So, and that's where I think that, the 3rd round for me is just that's a wide receiver or a late, rookie running back flyer that I don't need. It's more so maybe keeping him in spite so that guy doesn't turn around and use him against me to knock me out of the playoffs kind of mindset too, right? So, but yeah, and what about a package deal like him and I don't know what receivers are worth even getting, but I mean, like him and Sterling Shepard, or is that something that would, make a better offer? Or is that something that's like, nah, Adam Humphries, definitely not a good wide receiver, but he's been doing okay this year. Like, I mean, is he top 50, top 40 for like cover a bye week or something like that? Maybe no, top 70. No, he's kind of junk, but I guess I was just kind of curious on that.
Yeah, I think at least for me is the issue I'd be running into, and like I actually do like Gronk, like I said, he's played a lot better. I think the points above replacement might not necessarily be there, even though he is top 10, which is like, I guess I don't have the stats behind this, but what is he probably averaging, like 10 or 11 so far this year, give or take, which is a good line. And like you said, some teams or most teams are going to need an increase at tight end that Gronk would be able to provide. But to me, like the more marketable tight ends right now would be like Fant or Andrews. Like, would you consider selling either of those two, you think? Or is it basically just Gronk and you're looking to hold those other two?
I mean, what would you call the value of Fant or Andrews? I personally, I think I've been offered a couple of times on Fant, but again, I think it's just I'm getting a wide receiver that I already have. So it's not really benefiting me any that way, right? So like if I can't legitimately, in my opinion, better my team every week, I'll just keep Fant because I think that there's a time then place where he can outperform Andrews, and then I could both have them as flex, a tight end of flex. So like that's my biggest issue is like I feel like in a dynasty for where I'm at right now is like if I don't get an impactful increase on my wide receivers, I'm just gonna hold on to what I have, and unless that turns into draft picks, I don't know what to do with them. I think I benched Fant all year.
Mm-hmm.
Like played but maybe 1 week, so it's like I don't really know where I can trade him where it makes sense for me, because I might get depth at receiver, but if it's not if Traquan Smith might go off 1 week, Adam Humphries, and then it's Michael Gallup, like I'm not really getting any increase on what I'm getting for Fant. So that's kind of one of the biggest struggles for me, I guess.
Sure, that's fair. Just the offers aren't quite there,
and then might not be because of Fant being a tight end.
Right. And that's the tough thing. I actually do think that if you're just going for like pick value, I do think he's a late first. I mean, that's where he was drafted. And if anything, he has more present value than he did when he was drafted, because even though I don't think his stock has risen necessarily, I do think that his timer is farther along in his progression, which for tight ends, we all know takes a little bit longer for them to develop. Normally it's not until about year 3 before they're really fantasy assets. So if someone was looking and needed a tight end and wanted someone for the future, I would say you could definitely get a first. But to your point, like no one wants to give that up for a tight end because it's just, you only need one of them. So everyone kind of just hopes that they'll hit eventually, because otherwise they'll just be in the same situation as you, where you drafted a tight end and Mark Andrews hit. So
yeah. And I mean, for the record right now, I know Fantasy Pros isn't everything, but right now in Dynasty Fantasy Pros, they have Mark Andrews at number 3 and Fant at number 4. So like Fant or Mark Andrews, whichever one you prefer, the other one would be a huge increase on 8 teams in the league, right? So I think he's worth, I don't know, even a mid to late first. Like you're talking about pick 7 or 8 even is what I think he'd be worth. But it does kind of suck that you haven't gotten the offers that you think he's worth at this point.
Yeah, Sam. So real quick, who would you rather trade, Fant or Andrews?
Well, I mean, I got to go Andrews because I hate OU and I want to keep my brother and Fant. So like, but they're both on the market, right? Like I'm not going to deny both of them that they're tradable, but if I was to pick one of both being, 12 points a week every week, I'm going to take Fant because I can't stand OU and I like the Broncos, which is completely irrelevant to why, but that's just kind of where my stance is. And Fant's younger.
Sure. So if anyone's looking for a tight end, Andrews could potentially be on the block for the right price, right? As long as it's a solid receiver or a really good pick.
I'm going off what you guys are saying. So at least a round pick or a substantial, better than what I have wide receiver group, which doesn't take much, but I'm definitely going to need to see some impact there, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on your team, Laramie? We've done an awesome dive in, but anything else that we're forgetting?
My kicker is no. I'm just kidding. No, I think that I've kind of built my team on youth on running backs, and the mindset I had for my wide receivers hitting just didn't pan out. And so it's not that my wide receivers or my running backs are just, my end all be all, but I just value them pretty heavy because of the impact that I, put forth for them carrying my team with maybe questions at wide receivers. But I hope I defended myself well on all the maybe question marks that I had of maybe my so-called arrogancy on my running backs. Maybe we could call it that. I don't know. But I think I try to get my point across to the point where they're not untouchable, but definitely they're kind of the foundation of my team. I kind of had to go off of that once I acquired those core values of those guys.
Yeah, if it wasn't past the deadline, I would definitely vote for you.
yeah, me too. Writing campaign for Laramie Davies. But I also think that you should tell anyone that thinks you overvalue running backs to just kind of suck it, because right now you're in playoffs. So,
hey Tom, suck it.
Who, me?
Trujillo, suck it.
Yeah.
I think you could probably go down the line of our league and say suck it to him at some point.
I think honestly, in my defense, I think Sam has been like my only I got Laramie's back like multiple times. They're like, Cody's like, he's probably gonna lose. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna take Laramie this week, and then I lose. So it's like shit. But no, hopefully I defended myself well, I guess.
I think you did. I think it was really cool to listen to your team and to what your thoughts about your team was, because we talk about it all the time. It actually is. It's always really fun to dive into anyone's team in this league because there's so much parity. Like, there isn't a single team that I truly hate in the league. I think every team has a chance to at least rebound at some fashion. I do think that Sam's team has quite the stranglehold, and I think that'll be interesting to see what happens in the future with that. But other than that, number one stranglehold, I think there's a lot of parity. So that's pretty cool to me.
Yeah, still 10 teams in playoff contention. I think there are literally 10 teams within like 20 points of playoffs right now, which is absolutely crazy.
Whoa, guys, let me get my spotlight. You guys have been burying me the last couple weeks. Let me enjoy my week where I'm in the playoffs.
Yeah, you are in the playoffs, yeah?
Yeah, let's just leave it there. Then next week, knocked out again. I'm going to get beat. Then we could talk about the parity of all 10 teams being in there.
Just keep scoring points. That's all you got to do. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. Just got to score points.
Right? And people need to stop scoring against me. Damn it. I think like second or third in the league, or maybe fourth now. I don't even know what after last week, but I think I got more points against than points for. So it's hard to believe that I'm 4-4, so that's where I should be, right?
So real quick, I'm going to run through the scores and the final records at the moment, just for a quick update for what happened, really so that we can segue naturally into our final discussion, not to keep this too long, which is the power rankings. So stop me at any point if you want to highlight something, because I'm going to start just with me and Adam's matchup. I won 167 to 100.64, and I moved to 5-3, and Adam moves to 4-4, which we were high on Adam's team just last week, and I know he had some negative luck with buys and injuries this week, which is why he only scored 100. Matt lost this week, going to 3-5, losing to Eric Barber. Eric scoring 133 points. He sneakily moves to 4-4, a team that I know we haven't been too excited about, and we definitely like Matt's team quite a bit. So to see him go to 3-5, that's a little bit surprising to me, but we can definitely talk about that in the power rankings update as well. Trujillo's team, another darling of the league, most affectionately as our number 2 in every single week so far in our power rankings, has only scored 109 points, beating out Jake O'Brien, who is a team that's now moving to 4-4, scoring only 106 points this week. Not a great showing for either teams. Then we have Sam's team scoring 2. Yeah, interrupt.
So interrupt. Take. So Sam, are you curious or worried, I should say, maybe when Matt gets healthy?
Okay, so it's kind of a two-part answer. Yeah, his team is good. But I think the thing I'm happy about is I could only play Matt Trujillo, assuming he gets a bye, which I think he will, in the championship, which is 2 weeks. So somewhat worried, but the fact that I have 2 weeks is definitely a huge help. I'm actually a lot more concerned about the first week of playoffs, which is just a 1 week.
Okay, I was always curious when we brought up the 1-2 punch, but I don't think anybody that I've remembered called you to see like what's your take on being scared of Matt or not, because I think Matt, if he's winning now and he doesn't have his two best running backs, I mean, obviously he's not going to beat you putting up 109, but I was just curious on, are you going to overmanage or are you going to make a mistake that kind of way, right? Where you're like, shit, matchup wise, and you're like, I should have just played my guy instead of watching Matt's team, So I was just kind of curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, I might, especially in playoffs, anything can happen. So everyone says I have it locked up. I by no means have the championship locked up. Anything can happen in playoffs. So.
And that's almost entirely my reason for, not selling this year and just going for a partial rebuild going into next year, because I always do believe that I have the, 10% chance of beating Sam any one week, maybe less, but I also have the chance that someone else beats him before I get to him. And so then I would have a chance in the playoffs too. So if anything, even though I hate the 1 week playoffs. Like, I don't know if you've heard me say this several times, Laramie, on the podcast, but I hate it. Like I think 1 weeks are for regular season and 2 weeks are for playoffs, because the playoffs are so vital to the league and determining the right champion. That being said, it really favors me and it favors everyone this year when we have one team that's clearly ahead of anyone else.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with you. I like the 2 weeks of playoffs. I think that's a good thing. Essentially, it takes away from being lucky in 1 week, and you have to actually manage for the two. I like that idea.
Yeah, obviously we can't do it. We've talked about it several times. It's just too hard to implement. But it is one of my biggest hopes is that maybe the NFL does go to a 19-week season in the future, which I do think is very possible.
That would be awesome.
Oh man. I don't know about that. That might be that's what CFL does. I think in Canada, so that'd be okay. I guess we'll support that.
Rooting for your hometown in the NFL. I love it. All right. Well, thanks for interjecting, because that was actually a really good question about Trujillo, because he's a team that he was so complimentary about me last week when he was on. He was like, oh yeah, your team is up there in the same tier as me. And then by the end of the podcast, he actually changed his mind. He was like, oh, okay, never mind. I see now that we're looking at your team more and talking about it, you're definitely not in the same tier as me. I was like, thanks, man.
he's got a super good team, super deep, no holes at all. And I think he's just missing slight top end talent. But other than that, his team is really, really good.
Man, it's changed so much from last year. Like, oh my gosh.
He's made a lot of good trades.
Holy gosh, yeah. He's been on the positive side on almost every single trade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, I want to hate him, but I just can't.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Sam scored 290 points.
Can we interrupt? 290? Wow.
What's 290? That's Sam and I were talking about this before you hopped on, Laramie. That's a record. And not only is that a record, it's a record in two ways. And Sam said this before, but it is 290 points, which is the highest ever. It is also a differential of 210 points between the two teams, which will never be broken.
I just want to let you guys know, where if you look at my top two players there, those beat Mike's team.
Your two quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's that was a tough matchup. For Mike.
And I'm gonna go back on, like, I think me and Sam talked a couple weeks ago about is it Tyler Fulgham or Travis?
Travis, yeah, Travis.
Travis.
He's been the wide receiver one since he started playing. He's been insane.
Oh my god, I just drove me. I think trade offer was for him, but definitely could have used. I mean, I didn't need him yet because I don't think that would have put me over on any week, but he's definitely looking like Alshon and Deshaun Jackson are just going to have to get moved. Like, they're just not going to play because they're hurt all the time, or the Eagles just need to say, sorry, you're done, because we're going to build with this kid going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not to undersell my own players, but I don't know if he'll be the wide receiver one over Jalen Reagor going forward, but I think they'll at least be complementary of each other. So I think, I still think he'll be really good, but maybe not quite these numbers, but still solid.
And that's exactly my thought right there on the Gallup situation. They got a guy that's already better than him come in and, take the double coverage away to make them have two wide receiver ones. But yeah, no, I think you hit a home run with that. Was that a free agent pickup, or did you draft him by chance?
No, as a free agent pickup. I just got lucky with him. So, yeah. No skill in that one at all.
Good on you, just button pushing. I love it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's tough for me because he's still wearing his Lions jersey in his freaking picture.
That's
You
fine.
guys
They don't need receivers, right?
Yeah. We had him for and he was actually decent. Like he was the classic, like, oh, Travis Fulgham, who's this guy? Every game they'd talk about him, like, oh, this guy was drafted in the or I actually no, he was picked up. He wasn't drafted. He was an undrafted free agent. But yeah, and then we just let go of him for whatever reason. And he does look good. Actually, I think he's different than Rieger, to what you were saying, Sam. Like Rieger's to me more of like the Deshaun Jackson type.
100%.
It's literally the next generation of Alshon and Deshaun Jackson. And they're almost identical in my opinion. But
they're on a bad team and doing good right now, so we'll see what happens when the Eagles get better too. Holy.
True.
Absolutely. Cody scored 91 points per usual. You know, the lower he scores, the happier he is, because he is all but clinched that first draft pick overall, which is more than likely to be Trevor Lawrence, which the best quarterback prospect arguably since Andrew Luck, so he'll be happy with that pick. And then Laramie, actually, you're on the podcast, so you won this week. I think that's maybe serendipitous that you got to play the worst team in the league to be on the podcast, and you're in the playoffs. I mean, this is just the best week in general. So
yeah, I'll take advantage of it. I mean, sorry for being on Cody's ass. Like, I didn't really put a beat on him, but dealing with a little bit of smack talk, and you know what? I'll take the win right now, and I'll just keep him at 0-8, and I'll stay at my 4-4 humbly in the playoffs right now.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how that finishes out for you. And then we got Marcus, who scored 130 points and beat out Fowler. They're both 4-4, and I think that pretty naturally segues into the power rankings discussion. But before I do that, any other players or quick hits from these matchups this week you guys think of?
We'll probably go into it more, but really big win for Trujillo. Basically locks up that second bye unless he really tanks the rest of the season. So,
yeah, and did all the 3 and 4 guys except for Fowler win? No, Adam.
I know everyone in Division 3 lost. So they're all still tied.
Oh, okay.
Which is crazy. 3rd week in a row.
Wow. Cool. All righty. Yeah, sorry. Just first timer got questions.
No.
That's a good thing to bring up.
It is. That's why I asked for any last thoughts. So I'm going to pull over these power rankings here. I just put together a little template like we always have.
For the record, you might see my forehead more on this one because I'm zooming in to see where the hell we're ranked.
Oh, yeah. Well, just listen to the sound of our voice, Laramie. All right. So let's start at the bottom. So I've got if you can see this, Laramie, and anyone listening to the podcast, we have on the screen right now last week's rankings, week 7, with the tiers included here. And now we've got week 8, which is a blank slate. So let's start from the bottom. We all still agree Cody is the last in the league, right?
Yep, because I beat him.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, but I think we can all for sure agree that Cody's team does have a real future. And Laramie, any thoughts about Cody's team? Like, whenever you look at it, are you just like, holy shit, this man has a future for sure? Or are you kind of like, oh, man, what's he doing?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say he doesn't have a future in the future, or a future going forward, because he's the back-to-back champ, so he might know what the hell he's doing, right? But I just like – he's got 2 Broncos guys, so I give him props there. But, I mean, I think he's kind of – he's taking my role on the running back thing right now with JaMychal Hasty, Jerry Jeudy, Demir Beard. They're young guys who really don't have an identity yet. So it kind of is a big thing for him going forward, I think, to see how those guys do. Maybe not just year 1, year 2, but Michael Pittman, that big trade with Saquon Barkley, like he's taken no proof of him being good and just kind of taking a flyer on it. So I think that as much as we want to say he's building good for the future, he might just be, getting unlucky too, because you got Devin Duvernay. He hasn't really done a lot. Tyler Johnson, I like him there in Tampa Bay. So he's definitely young. So he's doing the right things for sure. Just see how it kind of pans out for him.
I do want to point out that Cody's team is sneakily competitive going into week 9.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising he's getting all these players because there is a real chance he doesn't get the number 1 pick.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Jackson projected for 15 points because of the injury situation. JaMychal Hasty now all of a sudden RB1 in San Francisco. Judy's putting up better numbers with Drew Lock in place. Christian Kirk has gone away from his terrible status early in the season when we were talking about, like, what do you do with Christian Kirk? So it's just funny looking at it. I don't know.
I think that
Cody,
kid
go ahead, Laramie.
Much though. That kid loss hurts him so much. Sorry, Sam. He's starting, I think, what is the kid's name from Missouri that's at the Broncos now? That Okuwa Bignoma or whatever his name is.
Alberto.
Alberto.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely a huge drop off from kiddos guaranteed 15 to 20 points a week. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping he doesn't get the number 1 overall, because if Mike does, then I'm looking pretty good to take his pretty boy Trevor Lawrence. So
That'd be big. Well, Cody plays me this week, so let's see if Cody can be the first one to beat me. That'd be priceless.
You've been calling back weeks.
Yeah.
I would laugh my ass off at that.
Me too. It'd be really funny.
It would be. What a way to end your undefeated season.
Mm-hmm.
Team 11, I think this is kind of rounding out that bottom tier. Mike Reed, we still agree on that?
Yep, no changes there for me at least.
No, I think that's accurate as ever. Yep.
Yeah, every single week we talk about how he definitely could trade some wide receivers in both Godwin and Chark and Kenny Golladay, but he did trade away Kenny Golladay, which was, in my opinion, a really good move for him, the right move. But now he's getting Antonio Brown. So let's just quickly touch on him. Like, is he a dynasty asset at all, or is he kind of just like Rob Gronkowski?
I think he's pretty much equivalent to Rob Gronkowski.
Man, I don't know. I think it just kind of drowns out Godwin and Evans, to be honest. Because, I mean, if Antonio Brown comes in there and does anything, I mean, it's just going to be an asset as a team thing good for Tampa Bay. But I think as a whole, I mean, I just don't know. I mean, Brady's got chemistry with him maybe just as much already with Brown as he does with Godwin and Evans now. So he could come in there and just dominate and really lose value for Evans and Godwin. But I'm just so anti against that guy. So I just hope he doesn't do well. He's just a POS in my opinion. But, I mean, he's all talent in the world. So who knows? Gronk, Brown, Evans, and Godwin, like, you kidding me? Like, if he does anything, they're going to be unstoppable.
Dude, I know. They were talking about that on Monday Night Football. Or Monday Night last night. They were talking about that. Like, their weapons are insane.
Yeah, and then even Rojo and Leonard Fournette as well are just, they like 7 solid weapons on their team. So crazy.
So this is where in the power rankings it starts to get a little bit crazier. Well, not that crazy, because that's really tier 4 or tier 3 is where it gets wild. But do we still think, is there any major movement for you guys between Skoniewski and Barber? Like, who would you rather have?
Laramie, I'll let you take this one.
I'm bouncing back and forth on the screens. I pulled up the other podcast from last week so I could see the power rankings you guys had last week. So I'm going to say, Sam, if you can go first, actually, so I can get this on my computer.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of have an interesting answer, I'd say, is I have them in the same order, but I actually do think that the tiers are just jumbled right now. Like, not to skip ahead too far, but I think the tier from Jake O'Brien all the way down to Barber is one tier now. It's like that. That's why I think it's mixed, just because, like, looking at the standings currently, we're deep enough into the season. I mean, we're 2/3 of the way down with the regular season, and they're all within, I believe, 25 points or so of each other, which is just like, it's anyone's game at that point, right? So that's kind of why I have all of them almost identical. I'd probably move Laramie up a couple though, not just because you're on the podcast, but just because you're I think your team is playing better, and it's definitely above Fowler, maybe above Jake. That's close.
Yeah, I think if my running backs were performing and not hurt, I'd make an argument for it. But, there's definitely parity there. That's hard to pinpoint who's the guy, especially with, I think all of us are 4-4. I agree with that for sure. I think Marcus is probably where he's at, but I mean, I think 7 through 10 you're saying?
Yep. 7 through 10. I think they're all pretty close.
Actually, I think you were saying even Jake O'Brien too, Sam, or no?
Is he not 7? Yeah, Jake O'Brien too.
Oh.
mean, I'm just looking at total points right now, which I think most of those teams will get in based off of. And we have the lowest is like 162. And Laramie, you're the highest of all those at 181. So everyone's within 19 points of each other, all 5 of those teams, which is just, I mean, how do you value those that much differently to me?
That's very.
Yeah.
I think I have to split them up still because I have more optimism for Jake and Fowler's teams over the bottom, the next 3 after that. So I would still personally, even though like their current results are that they're really close in points wise and record wise, I guess there's more of an arrow up for me for Jake O'Brien and Fowler's teams to make the playoffs. That being said, Laramie is currently in the playoffs, so it's hard to make that argument.
I was going to say Jake I could see, but Fowler does only have 1 healthy QB. So I don't think he's necessarily there. But that's why I was saying, I think Laramie's above O'Brien. But Laramie, where do you think you are in comparative to like those other teams?
I think I'm still behind Jake. I just think like his receivers are better than mine, and my running backs are hurt. So I'm relying on Gio and Bart and Boston Scott to get me that points. Granted, they've hit my last couple weeks, but T.Y. Hilton's not doing anything for him. But I mean, Will Fuller, he didn't get traded today. You stand there. Terry McLaurin. I mean, I think that they got options to get there. I just think his running backs and receivers as a whole are better than mine. So I definitely would put Jake above me. And I kind of think Ben Fowler's a little bit, ahead of me as well still. But I think that I'm kind of got a better argument against Ben. But just because of the trend of it, let's say that I'm ahead of him. Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, we might have to take this to a voting committee. Sam, speaking of election night voting, do you agree with that assessment? Would you put Laramie over Fowler?
Yeah. Like I said, I would put Laramie in between Jake and Fowler. I think the injuries for Fowler have been too much. Clearly, beginning of the season, I think Fowler's team was awesome, but it's just too much with no bench. I think Laramie's running backs are going to carry him a little bit more.
Wow. There really is some bias when we have a guy on the podcast, isn't there?
Because we move him up 1 spot.
Hey, man, his receivers are just Metcalf right now. He's got Galladay. He's questionable. And then he's got Cobb, Renfro, Fitzgerald. I mean,
Aaron Jones is still hurt too. Like,
are they better than Robbie Anderson and my crew? I mean, I don't necessarily say they're better, but definitely DK Metcalf puts them over. But then if you look at running backs, he's starting Jerick McKinnon. So I'm outdoing him there. And I think Matt Ryan is better than Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know. I guess we'll leave it up to you, Tom, for the overall assessment. Is what do you think, sir?
I mean, you guys both voted for it. It's tough because I know Sam, you're kind of making the depth argument, and he's definitely been ravaged by injuries. But I do see the argument, right? Because Laramie's team does have a strong suite of running backs. Now, we didn't even talk about Chase Edmonds earlier, even though we talked about your entire team. I actually was targeting Chase Edmonds because I was hoping you would value him lower, just because he's not really a long-term asset necessarily. So he's even a guy that's been able to plug in really well for you for Miles Sanders. So it's like I'm talking myself into putting you there.
Edmonds has looked really good too when he's played, debatably better than Kenny and Drake even. So
yeah, I'm glad I did pull the trigger on him earlier in the year because I almost traded him Matt. So
yeah, so I think I have to agree with you.
I can't vote. It's kind of like Kirk Herbstreit when he calls a game on Saturday night, he doesn't make a pick. So I can't it's not fair for me to vote. I'm not going to vote for somebody else. I'm going to vote for me, right? Who votes for somebody else?
That's true. 1 second here.
But yeah, either way, I mean, maybe you disagree, Larry, but I think like anyone of that tier can literally change week to week. Like if you score 100 and next week Fowler and Marcus both score 180, I'd put them above you too. And honestly, vice versa. If you score 180 and Jake scores 100, I put you ahead of him, because like we're getting so close to the end of the season. We're like week to week, the rankings in this tier can change, just because like if you're ahead in points, you're more likely to make playoffs. So I think you're better, basically.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Jake's above me still. His team's pretty damn good, I think. But yeah, I mean, I like if I was to face Fowler this week, even without Mixon or Sanders in my starting lineup, just because I know Boston Scott's going to get the carries and Gio Bernard's going to get the opportunities, and Edmonds is filling in for Drake, I think I beat him. I really do, because he's starting McKinnon, Bridgewater to my Matt Ryan. As long as Metcalf doesn't get over 30, I think I have a shot at beating him. Pretty good shot.
I'm going to step away for a few seconds. So before I step away, I'm actually going to, you guys should rank through, go through Matt Maggs, me, and Adam. Do they stay all in the same place? Assuming that we put Jake O'Brien at 6, would you still keep these in the same 3? I'm going to step away.
Okay, sounds good. Bye, Tom. All right, Laramie, you want me to take this first, or do you want it?
Yeah, I'll let you take it first, because I got to check out Tom's team. I kind of looked at it last week, but I want to kind of get my own.
Yeah, I can do. I guess I'll kind of explain my reasoning. This was obviously a pretty big week for Tom points-wise. I would definitely keep Matt where he is. He lost. He's only 3-5, and he's not that far ahead in points. I think he's still where he should be, where he should make playoffs, but he's kind of out of the division at this point, so that doesn't really matter. As far as Tom and Adam go, Adam is technically winning his division, but doesn't have an opportunity at the bye week. And I think his team is still ahead of Tom in points and maybe a little bit better. So personally, I'd keep these ranking Adam, Tom, Matt. But let me know what you think.
Well, man, as much as Tom has given me so much junk over the last couple of weeks, I really like Tom's team. I really do. I just think he's got so many options for his depth-wise that if he does run into buys, I haven't looked at his bye weeks, but I think like if he does run into some bye weeks where he plugs in, a different wide receiver. But my biggest question mark is Ezekiel Elliott. What's he going to do?
Yeah.
Like, is he an elite running back, or is he just going to be an RB, maybe bench spot going forward, because their offense is so bad? Because that's why I put Matt above him. But as far as Adam and Tom goes, I'm going to give Tom the benefit of the doubt and say that, maybe minus this week of them playing Pittsburgh, I think Zeke, will kind of get back to him, his old ways a little bit. But, I think that's the biggest overall question mark for me. If Zeke stinks, then Adam's better. If Zeke balls out, kind of gets back into it, I think he's better than Adam, because I love Tom's wide receiver depth. My gosh, he's hit some home runs there.
Yeah, Tom probably has the best receivers in the league, honestly. Like, he has tons of receivers, and most of them are good and really young too. But kind of like you've been saying, Zeke over the last 3 weeks is highest 10 points, which is obviously not what you expect of Zeke over the last couple of years. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see if we can get back to it, but that offense in general has just been terrible. One player we haven't really touched on today, but that's also having kind of a rough season, is Lamar Jackson. Have you looked into that at all? Like, what do you think of him? Do you still, I know most people had him at like the QB2 in Dynasty. Do you still have him up there? Or do you think he's a little bit worse now?
No, I've never. I loved him in college. I loved what he's doing, but I think it's too risky to put him that high in a dynasty because of his, he runs around and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, I love him, but if he goes on to be wide receiver or QB, top 5 for the next 5 or 6 years, me personally, I'm willing to miss out on him. That was kind of my philosophy on it. I just think he's one bad hit from being in concussion land and just not being able to play consistently. I still value the pocket passer of, Aaron Rodgers, a little bit more higher on my standard, just for the simple fact that their offense revolves around him running too. That's scary for me. If it was more of a passing offense where he could run, then that's fine. But I just, it's too risky for me to put him up there, just because I think, I'll take the doubters and, like I said, I'll eat it if I'm wrong. But no, I put him, definitely top 5, but I can't put him up there with Mahomes next to him. It scares me.
Yeah, I hear you. Just a little too much risk. Running 15, 20 times a game. I don't know. He's definitely fun to watch, at least in my opinion. He's a pretty exciting player, but he does take some hits that most quarterbacks don't end up taking. So
yeah, he's definitely electric. And the one thing I do want to bring up is that as much as Tom has that wide receiver depth, and he's not here to defend himself, I'm going to call him out because he offered me Jamison Crowder for Chase Edmonds this week. But he's been so anti-Juju this whole time that I thought maybe he'd sneak over and kind of maybe one-up that because of the anti-Juju stuff. But, I would definitely have moved Edmonds for a better wide receiver than his team that he has so many of. But I felt like Jamison Crowder was just kind of a low blow with all of his depth. If he needs a running back like Edmonds, I thought he would have maybe offered more. But no, I think he's above Adam but below Matt. Is that what the overall goal was here? Sorry, kind of got a little rambly.
Okay, I actually kind of had it out. So I had Adam, Tom, and then Matt, but you're saying you have it Matt, Tom, Adam, basically?
Yeah, I have Matt, Tom, Adam.
Okay, so Matt Magnuson, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Tom, what do you think?
I am back, and I can defend myself now.
Heard me. Damn it.
Try to sneak it in right as Tom sat down. I like it.
You can't hide anything from me, Laramie.
I was hoping you were going to have to go through the misery of listening to it and then be like, oh, shit, he called me out.
Yeah.
Well, now I just get to hear it twice when I listen back to it later.
Yeah.
No, it's tough, dude. Like, I don't know where to put any. Like, I was really high on Adam's team, and then his team did like nothing. But I get that it's just 1 week. Like, I still have probably the most optimism for Adam's team as a whole. So personally, I would keep it the same way it is. I don't think this week actually changed anything for me.
Yeah, we all had them different order, I think.
So what do we do now? Do we just call them all ties? Is that a thing we can do?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think they're all pretty much equal. Different strengths for each of them. So
I like it. Let's see if we can notice this. So we'll put them all in tier 2. Or I guess, oh shit, whatever. We'll
do tier 1.5 for trio.
There we go. All right. So on that note, were you guys finished talking about those 3 teams out of curiosity?
I think for the most part, yeah. Any final thoughts on those, Laramie?
No, I think we kind of talked it good enough. Yep.
Sweet. And then we round off to Trujillo at tier 1.5 at 2. That's not going to change. And same with Sam. That's not changing, especially with Sam's depth, even with his injuries. So any last thoughts about these power rankings, Laramie?
No, I just think that, just for that core group of Jake, me, Ben, and Barber. I still think personally Marcus is a little lower, but I think those are like some big matchups. And I'm interested to see what my team will do if for some way, some shape, some form, my backup running backs can still keep getting points. And if I can get a wide receiver to keep stepping up, but maybe a second one to maybe sneak me into the, I'd like to be solidified in the next podcast of Laramie's, he's going to make playoffs. So that's kind of my goal.
I'd be happy with that too, honestly. I'd love to see. I mean, now that I know you and you were a bit of an enigma for me before. When you only know someone for their hot takes on their team and they're turning you down for your trades, you have a different viewpoint on them, man.
Oh,
now that I feel like I've talked to you for a bit, I know you. I'm not going to send, a trade with spite anymore. It's going to be a trade with understanding.
A trade with love.
A trade with love.
Oh, see, this is another angle I'm taking at you guys for this podcast. I'm getting to know you guys now. You get a little soft heart for me.
Yeah, smart. Playing the political game. I like
that. Again, with the election night parallels.
Tom's voting for me for sure, hands down next time.
I love it. Well, I'm proud of us. We actually kept a reasonable time frame on this podcast. And so as a wrapping up note, Laramie, do you have any final message for the league?
No, other than the fact of I appreciate all you guys for taking a chance on me, because I know Matt just kind of maybe went to bat for me to come to the league. So, hopefully just kind of getting to know me through here. I'm a pretty even-keeled guy. I love football. I love hanging out with you guys. I wish I was closer, but no, it's been a tremendous 3-4 years, whatever it's been. I've had a blast with you guys doing this. The biggest thing for me is just not knowing you guys. So hopefully this is kind of step one for kind of getting to know you guys. Maybe we do this maybe once a month with a couple of guys to get better buddies with. And I just glad to be a part of it. And it's easy to have the outsider and be like, oh, I wish that guy was in the league. And I hope I'm kind of starting mending that bridge where it's, I fitting in with everybody and stuff like that. And I'm enjoying myself. I really do like it. It's a good time to hear you guys every week. And I think we got good camaraderie between the most of us. I just got to get to know everybody else too. But I greatly appreciate you guys having me on here. And I look forward to the next time when Cody's not available where I can maybe get the call up again. So thank you.
One of these teams I won't be available, and maybe you can join for me and just take over, because that's truly the biggest upgrade there could be.
I'm still saying no to the James Crowder trade. James Crowder.
Damn it. I thought I got you there. And with that, Sam, any final thoughts?
No, not really. Other than to echo Laramie, I'm glad you can come on. It was nice to get to know you a little bit, and I've really enjoyed playing with you over the last few years. I appreciate that you're always responsive on trade offers, and it's been fun. I know we've had some smack talk over it, so it's been a good time.
Appreciate it, man.
I agree, and again, I will reiterate the same statement. Thanks again for joining, Laramie. And if anyone else does want to join, we've actually really enjoyed having these guests on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun to have some new faces. So with that, thanks again for listening to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll talk to you guys next week.
It's a football podcast with Tom, Cody, and Sam.